Hello, I'm John, and this is my channel, Must Read More. Today I thought that I would go back to before I got on Booktube and show you what I read in July. I thought maybe it would be a good way to kind of give you an idea of what I read and what I like to read, and kind of just give you kind of an overview of what I read the month before I started my Booktube channel. And so I'll just dive right into that. First, I want to go over two books that I don't have anymore. I guess maybe I donated them or something. But first one was The Seven Sinners by Elizabeth Peters, which I was reading it going along, and I thought, well, this is kind of odd. But what it was is that I had mixed up Elizabeth Peters with Ellis Peters. She also wrote by, I believe, was it Elizabeth Pargeter? She wrote the Brother Cadfael mysteries, which I've read a couple of those. So I was reading it and I was thinking, well, this is different. But it was an entirely different person I'd mixed up. And it was about a group of students who have come from abroad to Rome. And that some of them are from Europe and some of them are from the U.S. And then one of them they have a friend who's a priest, and people in their friend group start getting killed. I can't remember the specifics because it's been a month and a half ago, but they come across, one of them actually runs head into this lady on the street. She's an older woman, and she's a librarian from the U.S., from somewhere in New England, and she helps them kind of solve this mystery. And it was okay. It was all right. It wasn't the best mystery I ever read. The main problem with it is that there were just too many characters in it. It was hard to keep in track of who was who. And the second book I want to mention before I start showing these other was Icebound by, I believe it was Andrea Pitzer, right? Andrea Pitzer, and it was a history of about 500 years ago. Was it the Dutch? They sent a ship. They thought that they could go all the way around the northern tip of the northern side of Russia to get around to China and India, they couldn't do it, of course. So they loaded up these ships, and they didn't take any winter provisions, and they went up into the north, into the Arctic Circle, to an island called, I think they called it, was it Nova Zembla? It's also called, I believe, Novaya Zemlya, which is, it's kind of hard to explain, but Russia's up here and there's a little island, and they got shipwrecked on this little island, and they were attacked by polar bears for months, and they had to live in a little kind of this little hut that they built, and they didn't like to eat the polar bears or anything, so they were hungry and they were cold, and they had to make their way all the way back to was it the northern tip of Norway? I've always gotten those countries right up there mixed up. So those are the two that I don't have with me. But then we'll just go into these other ones, and this is roughly in the order that I read them. I want to mention I'm only going to do half of them today, or in this video, just because I don't know how long it'll take me to talk about them, and I'll talk about the other half in another video. So if I'm wearing the same shirt in the next video, it's just because I'm probably going to do it right after I do this one, or really close. So then we have the Silent Service Seawolf Class by H.J. Riker. I picked up one of these in my last book haul, and I've read a couple of these, and they tend to be pretty good. They're really inventive. And I mentioned in my book haul video that we don't really know what would happen in a contemporary submarine war. or a contemporary war in which, modern submarines take place, because since World War II, there's only been, as far as I can remember, there's only been one torpedo attack by a submarine since World War II, and that was during the Falklands War, which was in the early 80s. So it's other than covert activities, putting in SEALs, or in the Soviet times, they used to go down and spy on cables, big cables. They'd patch into these underwater cables and listen to Soviet transmissions. But this one was pretty good. This was about the Seawolf. The USS Seawolf goes to China, and while they're there, China decides to attack Taiwan, and so the captain and the crew of the Seawolf are there and have to defend themselves and defend Taiwan, which is, this book was written probably in 2002, so that's, 2002, which we're still dealing with Taiwan and China today. But it was pretty good. It had the one thing that you'll notice about reading books about the Navy, whether it be H.J. Riker or Douglas Reaman, there are a few other people, maybe Alistair MacLean. The characters tend to be pretty similar and to be kind of stereotypical generally, but I think that's because the Navy tends to attract a certain kind of person, and also on ships, they have to act a certain way according to their rank and their job. But overall, I thought this was pretty good. I enjoyed it. I read quite a bit of books about submarines. I've been interested in submarines since I was a kid. So, yeah. The next one was A Sound of Thunder by Ray Bradbury. And I feel kind of conflicted about Ray Bradbury, because I really like the idea of Ray Bradbury, and I really like Ray Bradbury's ideas. But his writing to me kind of has a sickeningly sweet kind of feel to it. And I think when I was reading this, I kind of think that Ray Bradbury always kind of maintained the kind of sense of wonder and amazement of a 12-year-old boy or an 11-year-old boy. And I don't really feel that way, and I really didn't even feel that way when I was 11 or 12, so I have a hard time kind of connecting with Bradbury, even though I feel like he was a great writer. His work just doesn't really, I don't really connect with it. But I do still read Bradbury from time to time, and I don't really remember what was in this one because I read The Martian Chronicles right before this. I read this one for Michael K. Vaughan's Rocket Summer. Let's see, The Foghorn, that's pretty good. It's about a sea monster who falls in love with a foghorn. And R is for Rocket. But I'll be honest, I don't really remember these stories particularly well, just because they really aren't my kind of thing. Bradbury's writing just isn't my kind of thing. But so next I read Blue Skies and Blood, The Battle of the Coral Sea by Edwin P. Hoyt. This is about a Japanese carrier force and an American carrier force that went head to head in, I believe, 1942. And this was pretty good, but it was a little dry. I'd heard that Edwin P. Hoyt can be a little bit dry, and that was definitely the case in this video, or this, excuse me, it was definitely the case in this book. It was a little dry, but it was okay. And I collect these books like this. This is a Jove book, and you can see it's all on the back. But I collect Jove and Bantam and Fawcett. I believe it's Fawcett Gold Medal war paperbacks, World War II paperbacks. But they always have these really neat covers. They're all, painted paintings. I wonder if I can, try not to crack it. So I have quite a few of these, and I'm just kind of working my way through them as I go along. But this was kind of dry, like I said, and I have another Edwin P. Hoyt book, which is Bowfin, about the submarine USS Bowfin, also in World War II. But I'm not really particularly looking forward to reading another Edwin P. Hoyt book, just because this one was pretty dry, and that's, the history was good, and the, he was very clear and precise, but it was just lacking a kind of storytelling quality, I guess. I'm not really sure. Just, it was okay. And the next one was a lot of fun. It's Domain by James Herbert, the horror writer James Herbert. He was British. I don't think he's alive anymore, unfortunately. I've read a few of his books. I never read this is the third book in the series of the Rats. I never read the Rats, and I never read the one that came after this, just because I haven't found them. I buy mostly used books, and so I have to, take what I can find, and I just haven't found the other two of these, but I hope to find at least the Rats soon. I've read his book, The Fog and the Dark. Did he write Sepulcher? I think he wrote Sepulcher. For some reason I want to say that was Brian Lumley, or was it Brian? I'm not so good with names, you'll have to forgive me. I think he wrote Sepulcher, and I read that, and he really had a knack for violence, and so the plot of this book, I'm trying to keep the lights over there, kind of, but the plot of this book was that in the very beginning there's a guy hurrying to get to a nuclear bunker because he knows that a nuclear strike is about to take place on London, and he's saved by another guy who pulls him into a building right at the moment of the explosion, but he goes blind, and so this other guy that saved him has to guide him to this bunker, and they have to go down into the train tunnels, and it turns out that the giant killer rats, they're not huge, but they're about the size of a small dog, and they really like to eat people, have gone on living in the train tunnels. I'm sorry this is a spoiler if you haven't read The Rats and the second book in the series, but I mean, come on, that the rats, there's no way they stop the rats. And so anyway, it's kind of, this book reminds me a lot of two movies. First of all, it reminds me of Threads, which is a really depressing, grim movie about a nuclear attack on the UK, which I believe that's from either the late 70s or the early 80s. It's a really depressing movie, but it's worth a watch if you've never seen it. Just be prepared to be depressed. And it also reminds me of Day of the Dead, the one where they're in the not the bunker, but it's like a mine, like an old mine, and there's some soldiers and everything, and all the zombies are out. They're on an island. I think that's Day of the Dead, right? Dawn of the Dead takes place in a mall, and Day of the Dead is in the tunnels. So yeah, that was a lot of fun, and as you may imagine, things don't really go right for these people, and the rats come in, and on top of that, they're dealing with fallout and destruction. And I should have saved this for Garb August, but it was a really good read. And yeah, so the next one I read was, you'll have to forgive me for this pronunciation, I'm not really sure how to say this, Balcony in the Forest by Julien Gracq? I really don't, I'm really not so good with pronunciations. This book is about, it was written by, I believe, by a Frenchman. It's about a French soldier in the days leading up to the German invasion of France. And he's stationed in a quiet village in a forest. his job is he commands this machine gun bunker at a crossroads, and even though the war has already started, nothing's happening where he is, and he meets a girl, and they have a relationship, and it's very quiet and very, is the word pastoral? It's kind of dreamlike. This is kind of a dreamlike novel, and I can't say that it was my favorite read, but it was definitely interesting. But anyway, eventually, 1939, the war comes, and finally the war comes. War comes to where he is, and yeah, so I was glad that I read it, even if it wasn't really my kind of thing. It's in this really nice NYRB. NYRB always has such nice covers, I think. I really like their covers, and during the in 2020 and 2021, there were a whole bunch of NYRBs at my local bookstores, and I don't know why I didn't buy more of them, because every time I read one, I'm glad that I read it. I have a couple more up here. So, yeah. The next one was Helmet for My Pillow by Robert Leckie, which I'm pretty sure that Robert Leckie went on to write histories. I'm pretty sure that Robert Leckie wrote Mr. Washington's War, which I read, right? But this is his story about being in the Marine Corps in World War II. They sent him to, first it's about going to boot camp in, I think, North Carolina or Georgia. North Carolina, I think. Then he's sent to Guadalcanal. Then he's sent to, I think, New Guinea or New Britain. And then on to Peleliu. So if you've read, oh good Lord, Sledgehammer, what was his name? Eugene Sledge. If you read his With the Old Breed, that was on Peleliu also, and I can't remember exactly. Eugene Sledge might have been in this book, but I thought this was Leckie was really open about the war. He was really open about kind of some of their bad behavior that they got up to, both when they were stateside drinking and carrying on, and also, when they were fighting and treasure hunting and that kind of thing. So when I was a kid, when I was probably 12 years old, I helped my uncle clean out a shed, and I got a bunch of books. There were a bunch of books in these boxes, and of course they were old, and they were from the 70s, and they smelled pretty bad. And this was one of them. It wasn't this edition. This is a newer 2000s edition, but I had Helmet for My Pillow for years, and I never did read it, and one day I got rid of it, and I wanted to read it for several years, and I finally found it a couple months ago. But yeah, that's Helmet for My Pillow. The next one I read was, here's another submarine novel, The Triton Ultimatum by Lawrence Delaney. And this is another book I should have saved for Garb August, I guess. What happens is that there's a new submarine, a new ballistic sub has been built. I think it's called the Jimmy Carter, right? Maybe it'll say. I'm not sure. It doesn't really matter what it was called, but I think it was either called Jimmy Carter or... Yeah, so some thieves managed to get on there. And one of them is this guy who's really, really angry at the world. So they're all pretty much Navy veterans, and there is a Japanese tycoon who's really also secretly funding a terrorist organization, and he sets up this plot to hijack this nuclear submarine and hold the U.S. for ransom, hold the world for ransom, and things don't go to plan, and This book has a strange ending. It's just a strange book altogether. It's not the best written book in the world. It's not the worst written book in the world. It's got an interesting premise, but I'm not sure that it was carried out very well. So, yeah. And then the next book I want to share is 1066 by David Howarth. Howarth? And this is about the Norman Conquest in 1066, Norman Conquest of England. A good king, a relatively good king who had been around for quite some time. He didn't have any kids. He didn't have any sons. Died, and he left it to a guy named Harold. There's some dispute about how all this went down. It was 1,000 years ago, so it's a little bit conflicted as to exactly what happened, but his friend named Harold had kind of taken the throne, but for some reason the Duke of Normandy got it in his head that he was which Normandy of course is in France, across the channel. The Duke of Normandy got it into his head that Harold was going to give him the crown, going to give him England, just hand him England. I don't know what was in his head, because why would you ever think that? Why would you ever think that somebody would give up being the King of England for, to give it to you? That part's really kind of strange. And so the Duke of Normandy got really mad, and he assembled an army, and they made a cross-channel invasion, and they took the throne. They took England. And so I guess that set up the foundation of the English monarchy till much later on, I guess until the Tudor times, maybe. I'm working on learning more about the English monarchy and English history in general. I know a bit about, say, from Queen Victoria onward, but I don't really know a whole lot about the time between Queen Victoria's time and before, between, I guess, Caesar's conquest of England like I said, I'm pretty spotty about that. I don't really, that's why I have quite a bit of books about about England and the English monarchy, and because I'm just really, I don't know a whole lot about that, and I'd like to know more. So yeah, so those are the books I wanted to share today, and I've got a few more over here that I'll share in another video. But this video is already 23 minutes long, so I don't want to go on too long, and so I'll see you in part 2. So thank you, and I'll see you next time. Well, I'll see you next time if I can get this to go off.